Question 1. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of academic underperformance for an applicant due to a gap in their previous studies, but also a high potential for innovation based on their submitted project proposal. The admissions committee must decide whether to proceed with the application. Which of the following represents the most appropriate approach? Option A. Immediately reject the application due to the identified risk of academic underperformance, as per the matrix's indication. Option B. Conduct a follow-up interview to discuss the academic gap and explore the applicant's strategies for addressing it, while also further evaluating the depth of their innovative project. Option C. Request additional standardized test scores to definitively confirm the applicant's academic capabilities, disregarding the project proposal's implications. Option D. Accept the application without further scrutiny, prioritizing the high potential for innovation over the moderate risk. The correct answer is B. Conduct a follow-up interview to discuss the academic gap and explore the applicant's strategies for addressing it, while also further evaluating the depth of their innovative project. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret a risk assessment tool, the risk matrix, and apply its findings to a critical decision regarding an applicant's suitability for admission to the Altamira Technological Institute. The challenge lies in balancing the identified risks with the Institute's admission policies and ethical considerations, ensuring a fair and transparent process. Careful judgment is required to avoid bias and to make a decision that aligns with the Institute's stated objectives and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's profile against the identified risks, considering any mitigating factors or contextual information that might explain the risk indicators. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of due diligence and fair assessment, which are implicitly expected within any educational institution's admission process. It prioritizes a holistic evaluation rather than a purely mechanistic application of the risk matrix. This aligns with the spirit of the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam guidelines, which aim to identify capable and suitable candidates while maintaining academic integrity. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the highest risk score without further investigation fails to acknowledge the nuances of individual circumstances. This is ethically problematic as it could lead to the rejection of a potentially strong candidate based on incomplete information, violating principles of fairness and equity. Another incorrect approach that dismisses all identified risks as irrelevant ignores the purpose of the risk matrix, which is to flag potential areas of concern that warrant attention. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and could compromise the integrity of the admission process. Finally, an approach that focuses only on the applicant's perceived potential without adequately addressing the identified risks overlooks the Institute's responsibility to manage risk and ensure a successful learning environment for all students. This could lead to future issues that negatively impact the student and the institution. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the purpose and limitations of any assessment tool. This involves gathering all relevant information, critically evaluating it, considering potential biases, and making a decision that is both justifiable and ethically sound, in line with established institutional policies and guidelines. Question 2. To address the challenge of ensuring the integrity of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance examination process, an applicant discovers a minor, unintentional discrepancy in a supporting document submitted during the application phase. Which of the following actions best reflects a professional and compliant approach to resolving this issue? Option A. Attempt to discreetly correct the discrepancy on the submitted document before it is officially reviewed. Option B. Immediately contact the Altamira Technological Institute's admissions office to explain the discrepancy and provide the correct information or documentation. Option C. Hope that the discrepancy is minor enough that it will not be noticed by the admissions committee. Option D. Ask a friend who has prior experience with the Altamira Technological Institute to advise on how to best handle the situation without official notification. The correct answer is B. Immediately contact the Altamira Technological Institute's admissions office to explain the discrepancy and provide the correct information or documentation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the Altamira Technological Institute's admission policies and the ethical considerations involved in the application process. The challenge lies in discerning the most appropriate and compliant method for addressing a potential discrepancy in submitted documentation, balancing the need for accuracy with the principles of integrity and fairness inherent in academic admissions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken aligns with the institute's stated regulations and upholds the integrity of the entrance examination process. The correct approach involves proactively and transparently communicating the potential error to the admissions committee, providing the necessary clarification or corrected documentation. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of honesty and integrity, which are fundamental to academic institutions. By informing the institute directly, the applicant demonstrates accountability and respect for the established procedures. This aligns with the implicit ethical guideline of academic honesty, which expects applicants to present accurate information and to rectify any unintentional errors promptly. Furthermore, it allows the admissions committee to make an informed decision based on complete and accurate information, thereby upholding the fairness of the selection process. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential discrepancy, hoping it goes unnoticed. This fails to uphold the principle of academic honesty and could be construed as an attempt to deceive the admissions committee. If discovered, it would likely lead to disqualification and damage the applicant's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to alter the original document without authorization, or to submit a revised document without clearly indicating the change and the reason for it. This action undermines the integrity of the documentation process and could be seen as an attempt to falsify information, a serious ethical breach in any academic or professional setting. Further incorrect approach would be to seek assistance from an external party to fix the discrepancy without the institute's knowledge or approval. This not only violates the principle of individual accountability, but also introduces the risk of misrepresentation and could lead to accusations of academic misconduct. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a commitment to transparency, honesty, and adherence to established rules. When faced with a potential error or discrepancy in submitted materials, the first step is to carefully review the requirements and the submitted documents. If an error is identified, the professional course of action is to consult the relevant guidelines or policies of the institution. If the guidelines are unclear, direct and honest communication with the appropriate authority, in this case, the admissions committee, is paramount. The goal should always be to ensure that all information presented is accurate and that the process is conducted with the utmost integrity. Question 3. The review process indicates that a critical system vulnerability has been identified, potentially impacting student data security. To effectively address this, immediate access to specific student usage logs is required to pinpoint the source of the exploit. Which of the following actions best aligns with the Altamira Technological Institute's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for handling sensitive student information? Option A. Submit a formal, documented request to the IT security department, clearly outlining the nature of the vulnerability, the specific data required, and the justification for its necessity in addressing the security threat. Option B. Wait for the next scheduled data audit to review the logs, as this is the only authorized method for accessing such information. Option C. Ask a colleague in the IT department to informally retrieve the logs and share them, as they might have easier access. Option D. Directly access the student usage logs through administrative privileges to expedite the investigation and identify the exploit source without delay. The correct answer is A. Submit a formal documented request to the IT security department, clearly outlining the nature of the vulnerability, the specific data required, and the justification for its necessity in addressing the security threat. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for information to address a critical issue and the established protocols for data access and privacy, which are paramount in any educational or technological institution. The Altamira Technological Institute, like any reputable institution, operates under specific guidelines that govern how sensitive information, particularly student data, can be accessed and utilized. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the situation with the legal and ethical obligations to protect individual privacy and maintain data integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken is both effective in resolving the immediate problem and compliant with all relevant regulations. The correct approach involves a formal request through the designated channels, which prioritizes data security and adherence to institutional policies. This method ensures that any access to student data is documented, authorized, and conducted by personnel with legitimate need and appropriate clearance. This aligns with the principles of data protection and privacy, which are often codified in institutional charters and potentially in broader educational technology regulations that Altamira would be expected to follow. By using the official request process, the individual demonstrates respect for the established governance structure and the rights of the students whose data is involved. An incorrect approach that bypasses official channels, such as directly accessing student records without authorization, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action violates privacy laws and institutional policies designed to prevent unauthorized access and misuse of sensitive information. It undermines trust within the institution and could lead to severe disciplinary action, including potential legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on informal requests or hearsay from colleagues, fails to establish a verifiable and accountable record of data access. This can lead to misinformation, misinterpretation of data, and a lack of clear responsibility if errors occur. It also bypasses the necessary oversight mechanisms designed to ensure data accuracy and appropriate use. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the problem and the information needed. They must then consult the relevant institutional policies, regulatory frameworks, and ethical guidelines governing data access and privacy. The next step is to determine the most appropriate and compliant method for obtaining the required information, which typically involves formal channels. If the official process seems overly burdensome or slow for an urgent situation, the professional should escalate the concern through appropriate administrative channels, seeking expedited review rather than circumventing the process entirely. This ensures that urgency does not override compliance and ethical responsibility. Question 4. What factors determine the appropriate level of security measures to be implemented for the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance examinations, ensuring compliance with the institute's regulatory framework and ethical standards? Option A. The perceived threat level of cheating based on anecdotal evidence from previous years, without formal documentation or analysis. Option B. The personal opinions of the examination committee members regarding acceptable levels of student privacy during assessments. Option C. The cost-effectiveness of the most restrictive security measures available, regardless of their impact on the applicant experience or fairness. Option D. A comprehensive impact assessment considering potential effects on applicants, invigilators, and the institute, aligned with Altamira Technological Institute's internal regulations and ethical guidelines for fair assessment. Correct answer is D. A comprehensive impact assessment considering potential effects on applicants, invigilators, and the institute, aligned with Altamira Technological Institute's internal regulations and ethical guidelines for fair assessment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Altamira Technological Institute, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to ensure the integrity of its entrance examination process. This involves safeguarding against any form of academic dishonesty, which can undermine the fairness of admissions and the reputation of the institute. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security measures with the rights and expectations of prospective students. Careful judgment is required to implement policies that are effective, proportionate, and ethically sound, adhering strictly to the Altamira Technological Institute's established regulatory framework for entrance examinations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the potential effects of proposed security measures on various stakeholders, including applicants, invigilators, and the institute itself. This assessment must be grounded in the Altamira Technological Institute's internal regulations and any relevant national guidelines governing educational assessments. The ethical justification lies in promoting fairness, transparency, and equity in the admissions process. By proactively identifying and mitigating potential negative impacts, the institute upholds its commitment to providing a level playing field for all candidates. This aligns with the ethical principle of justice and the regulatory requirement to conduct examinations in a fair and unbiased manner. An incorrect approach would be to implement stringent security measures without a thorough assessment of their impact. For instance, a blanket ban on all electronic devices, without considering legitimate uses such as assistive technologies for students with disabilities, would be ethically problematic and potentially discriminatory. This fails to uphold the principle of reasonable accommodation and could violate internal institute policies designed to support diverse applicant needs. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on punitive measures after an incident, rather than investing in preventative strategies informed by an impact assessment. This reactive stance fails to address the root causes of potential security breaches and can create an environment of distrust, which is contrary to the Institute's goal of fostering a positive and supportive learning environment. Furthermore, ignoring the potential for undue stress or anxiety caused by overly intrusive security protocols would be an ethical oversight, as it could negatively affect applicant performance and well-being, contradicting the Institute's duty of care. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory context of the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exams. This involves identifying all relevant internal policies, guidelines, and any overarching national educational standards. The next step is to define the objectives of any proposed changes or new measures. Following this, a thorough impact assessment should be conducted, considering both intended and unintended consequences for all stakeholders. This assessment should inform the selection of the most appropriate and ethically justifiable measures, ensuring they are proportionate to the risks identified and aligned with the Institute's values and regulatory obligations. Finally, a process for ongoing review and adaptation should be established to ensure the effectiveness and fairness of the implemented measures over time. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that proposed changes to the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam curriculum require a thorough impact assessment. Which approach best aligns with the Institute's established protocols for evaluating such changes? Option A. Gathering informal opinions from a select group of senior faculty members regarding their initial impressions of the curriculum changes. Option B. Prioritizing the perceived enthusiasm of prospective students for the new curriculum, assuming this directly translates to successful learning. Option C. Focusing exclusively on the immediate cost savings associated with implementing the new curriculum, without considering broader academic implications. Option D. Conducting a detailed analysis of how the proposed curriculum changes will affect student learning outcomes, faculty teaching loads, and the allocation of institutional resources, referencing the Institute's documented impact assessment framework. The correct answer is D. Conducting a detailed analysis of how the proposed curriculum changes will affect student learning outcomes, faculty teaching loads, and the allocation of institutional resources, referencing the Institute's documented impact assessment framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exams evaluation methodology, as outlined in its internal guidelines, requires a balanced and comprehensive assessment of candidates. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen approach to impact assessment for the exam's proposed curriculum changes genuinely reflects the intended outcomes and potential consequences, adhering strictly to the Institute's established framework for academic program development and evaluation. Misinterpreting or misapplying this methodology could lead to flawed decisions regarding curriculum, resource allocation, and ultimately the quality of education provided. The correct approach involves a systematic analysis of the proposed curriculum, changes potential effects on student learning outcomes, faculty workload, and institutional resources, directly referencing the Altamira Technological Institute's established impact assessment protocols. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Institute's commitment to evidence-based decision-making and its regulatory requirement to conduct thorough impact assessments before implementing significant academic changes. The Institute's guidelines mandate a multifaceted evaluation that considers both direct and indirect impacts, ensuring that all relevant stakeholders and potential consequences are accounted for, thereby upholding academic integrity and operational efficiency. An approach that focuses solely on perceived student interest without a structured evaluation of learning outcomes fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a comprehensive impact assessment. This is ethically problematic as it prioritizes superficial appeal over pedagogical effectiveness and the Institute's core mission. Another incorrect approach, which relies on anecdotal feedback from a small group of faculty without a systematic data collection process, violates the institute's guidelines for robust data gathering and analysis. This can lead to biased conclusions and an incomplete understanding of the true impact. Furthermore, an approach that solely considers the immediate financial implications without evaluating the long-term academic and operational consequences neglects a crucial aspect of the institute's impact assessment framework, potentially leading to unsustainable decisions. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory framework and guidelines governing the assessment. This involves identifying the key objectives of the impact assessment, the required data sources, and the analytical methods prescribed by the Altamira Technological Institute. They should then critically evaluate each potential approach against these established criteria, prioritizing those that demonstrate a systematic, evidence-based, and comprehensive consideration of all mandated impact areas. Question 6. System analysis indicates a potential discrepancy in student enrollment data that could impact future resource allocation. To investigate this, a faculty member needs to access detailed student academic records. Which of the following actions best aligns with the Altamira Technological Institute's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for data handling? Option A. Directly access the student information system and download the relevant records to begin an immediate analysis. Option B. Contact the IT department and request a broad export of all student academic data for a general review. Option C. Submit a formal request to the registrar's office, clearly outlining the purpose of the data access and the specific information required, adhering to the Institute's data access protocol. Option D. Ask a few students informally if they can provide their academic transcripts to cross-reference the data. Correct answer is A. Directly access the student information system and download the relevant records to begin an immediate analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for information to address a potential compliance issue and the strict adherence to the Altamira Technological Institute's established data privacy and access protocols. Navigating this requires a delicate balance to ensure both institutional integrity and the protection of student data. The correct approach involves a formal request through the designated channels, prioritizing adherence to the Altamira Technological Institute's internal policies and data governance framework. This method ensures that any access to student information is documented, authorized, and conducted in a manner that respects privacy rights and regulatory compliance as outlined by the Institute's guidelines. This upholds the ethical obligation to protect sensitive data and avoids any potential breaches of trust or policy violations. An incorrect approach that bypasses official channels and directly accesses student records without explicit authorization, even with good intentions, constitutes a serious breach of the Altamira Technological Institute's data privacy policies. This action undermines the established security measures and could lead to disciplinary action, loss of trust, and potential legal ramifications for the individual and the institute. Another incorrect approach, which involves seeking informal verbal consent from a few students without a formal process, is also professionally unacceptable. While seemingly less intrusive than direct access, it lacks the rigor of a documented and authorized data request. This informal method does not guarantee comprehensive consent, may not cover all necessary data points, and fails to create an auditable trail, leaving the institute vulnerable to accusations of inadequate data protection practices. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Identifying the core issue and the information required. 2. Consulting the Altamira Technological Institute's relevant policies and procedures regarding data access and compliance. 3. Prioritizing formal, authorized channels for information retrieval. 4. Documenting all steps taken and communications. 5. Escalating concerns or seeking clarification from appropriate administrative or compliance officers if the established procedures are unclear or insufficient. Question 7. System analysis indicates that a new AI-powered learning platform promises significant enhancements to student engagement and personalized learning pathways at Altamira Technological Institute. However, the implementation of this platform involves the collection and processing of sensitive student data. Which approach best balances the Institute's commitment to academic innovation with its regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the platform's alignment with pedagogical goals, data privacy regulations, and Altamira's procurement policies before any commitment is made. Option B. Select the most cost-effective AI learning platform available, assuming that all necessary regulatory and privacy requirements will be met by the vendor without independent verification. Option C. Proceed with immediate implementation of the platform to leverage its academic benefits, addressing any regulatory or privacy concerns only after the technology is fully operational. Option D. Prioritize the acquisition of the platform based on its perceived academic advantages, deferring a detailed review of data privacy and regulatory compliance until a later stage. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the platform's alignment with pedagogical goals, data privacy regulations, and Altamira's procurement policies before any commitment is made. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for a new technology to enhance student learning and the imperative to adhere to Altamira Technological Institute's established procurement and data privacy regulations. The Institute's commitment to academic excellence must be balanced with its legal and ethical obligations to protect student information and ensure fair, transparent acquisition processes. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing priorities without compromising either academic goals or regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the proposed technology against Altamira's regulatory framework. This includes a thorough review of data privacy implications, ensuring compliance with any student data protection policies or guidelines mandated by the Institute. It also necessitates an assessment of the technology's alignment with pedagogical objectives and its potential to enhance learning outcomes, as well as a procedural review to confirm adherence to procurement protocols. This approach is correct because it prioritizes due diligence, risk mitigation, and regulatory adherence, which are fundamental to responsible institutional operations and safeguarding student interests. It ensures that any technological adoption is not only beneficial, but also legally sound and ethically defensible. An approach that bypasses the formal impact assessment and proceeds directly with implementation is incorrect because it disregards established institutional procedures designed to protect the institute and its students from potential risks. This failure to conduct a proper assessment constitutes a breach of regulatory compliance, potentially exposing the institute to legal liabilities related to data breaches or non-compliance with privacy mandates. Furthermore, it undermines the principles of transparency and accountability in procurement. An approach that focuses solely on the potential academic benefits without considering the regulatory and privacy implications is also incorrect. While academic enhancement is a primary goal, it cannot supersede legal and ethical obligations. Ignoring data privacy concerns can lead to severe consequences, including reputational damage and legal penalties, if student data is mishandled or compromised. This approach demonstrates a lack of holistic risk management. An approach that prioritizes cost-effectiveness above all else, even if it means overlooking potential regulatory noncompliance or privacy risks, is fundamentally flawed. Financial considerations are important, but they must be weighed against legal and ethical responsibilities. A seemingly cost-effective solution that violates regulations can lead to far greater financial and reputational costs in the long run. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should begin with identifying all potential risks, including regulatory, ethical, financial, and operational. Subsequently, each risk should be evaluated for its likelihood and potential impact. Mitigation strategies should then be developed and implemented, prioritizing those that ensure compliance with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. Continuous monitoring and review are essential to adapt to evolving circumstances and maintain compliance. Question 8. System analysis indicates that Altamira Technological Institute is considering integrating an advanced AI-powered system to automate aspects of its entrance exam scoring and candidate evaluation. Before full implementation, what is the most prudent and ethically sound approach to ensure compliance with the Institute's regulatory framework and uphold the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Implement the AI system on a limited basis, focusing only on aspects that demonstrably speed up the process, and address any potential issues or regulatory concerns only if they are explicitly raised by applicants or external bodies. Option B. Proceed with the immediate deployment of the AI system, leveraging its advanced capabilities to streamline admissions, assuming that technological advancement inherently implies fairness and efficiency. Option C. Develop a public relations campaign highlighting the cutting-edge nature of the AI system to generate positive perception, while conducting only superficial checks for compliance with Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations. Option D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the AI system, scrutinizing its potential for bias, data privacy implications, and alignment with existing Altamira Technological Institute admissions regulations and ethical guidelines, followed by pilot testing and stakeholder consultation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the AI system, scrutinizing its potential for bias, data privacy implications, and alignment with existing Altamira Technological Institute admissions regulations and ethical guidelines, followed by pilot testing and stakeholder consultation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to innovate and the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks governing educational institutions, specifically within the context of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam. The pressure to demonstrate technological advancement must be balanced against the need for fairness, transparency, and the integrity of the admissions process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed technological integration enhances, rather than compromises, these core principles. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that meticulously evaluates the proposed AI-driven admissions system against the Altamira Technological Institute's established entrance exam regulations and ethical guidelines. This assessment must identify potential biases, ensure data privacy, and verify that the system aligns with the Institute's stated objectives for student selection. Regulatory justification stems from the implicit requirement within any educational institution's framework to maintain fair and equitable admissions processes, which are often underpinned by specific internal policies and broader educational accreditation standards that prohibit discriminatory practices and mandate data security. Ethically, this approach upholds the principle of fairness by proactively identifying and mitigating potential disadvantages to certain applicant groups. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technological novelty of the AI system without a thorough regulatory review fails to acknowledge the governing framework. This would be a significant ethical failure, as it prioritizes innovation over the fundamental right of applicants to a fair evaluation. It also represents a regulatory failure by potentially violating internal policies or external accreditation standards that mandate due diligence in admissions processes. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing the AI system with minimal testing and relying on anecdotal evidence of its effectiveness is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a regulatory failure by bypassing essential validation steps required to ensure compliance with established standards for admissions integrity. Ethically, it is a failure of due care, as it exposes applicants to an unproven system that could lead to arbitrary or biased outcomes. A third incorrect approach that involves selectively presenting positive results of the AI system while downplaying negative findings to stakeholders is a clear ethical breach of transparency and honesty. This also constitutes a regulatory failure by misrepresenting the system's performance, potentially leading to decisions that are not based on accurate information, thereby undermining the integrity of the admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying all relevant regulations and ethical principles. Next, potential impacts of any proposed change are brainstormed, followed by an evaluation of the likelihood and severity of these impacts. Mitigation strategies are then developed and implemented, with continuous monitoring and review to ensure ongoing compliance and ethical conduct. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a potential for undue influence on the admissions committee regarding a group of applicants from a specific preparatory program known for its high success rate, but also for its intensive, potentially coaching-based preparation methods. The The committee is tasked with evaluating these applicants alongside others. Which of the following approaches best upholds the integrity of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam and its admission policies? Option A. Focus on meeting a predetermined diversity target by admitting a significant number of students from the flagged preparatory program, even if their individual scores or qualifications are slightly below the general threshold, to ensure representation. Option B. Rely on anecdotal evidence and personal endorsements from instructors familiar with the flagged preparatory program to supplement the objective data, particularly for borderline candidates. Option C. Conduct a thorough, objective review of all applicant data, including academic records, exam scores, and any supplementary materials, against the established admission criteria. For applicants from the flagged preparatory program, pay extra attention to the authenticity of their work and seek clarification on any unusual patterns in their application, while ensuring all applicants are assessed using the same rigorous standards. Option D. Prioritize applicants from the flagged preparatory program due to their historically high success rate, assuming their preparation methods are effective and indicative of future success, while giving less scrutiny to their application details. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough, objective review of all applicant data, including academic records, exam scores, and any supplementary materials, against the established admission criteria. For applicants from the flagged preparatory program, pay extra attention to the authenticity of their work and seek clarification on any unusual patterns in their application, while ensuring all applicants are assessed using the same rigorous standards. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions, where the integrity of the admissions process must be balanced with the need to attract diverse and qualified candidates. The Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam, as a gatekeeper to higher education, is bound by specific regulations and ethical guidelines designed to ensure fairness, transparency, and meritocracy. The risk matrix in this context highlights potential threats to these principles, such as bias, unfair advantage, or the admission of unqualified individuals. Navigating these risks requires a deep understanding of the Institute's own admission policies, which are implicitly governed by broader educational standards and ethical codes of conduct for academic admissions. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective review of all applicant data against established admission criteria, with a particular focus on identifying and mitigating any potential biases or irregularities that the risk matrix has flagged. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principle of fairness in selection processes and the regulatory requirement for transparent and equitable admissions. By adhering strictly to the predefined rubric and seeking clarification on ambiguous data points, the admissions committee upholds the integrity of the exam and the Institute's reputation. This systematic and evidence-based method ensures that decisions are defensible and compliant with the spirit and letter of academic admission regulations. An incorrect approach that prioritizes anecdotal evidence or personal recommendations over objective data fails to meet regulatory standards for fair assessment. Such an approach introduces subjectivity and potential bias, undermining the meritocratic basis of the entrance exam. Another incorrect approach, which involves overlooking flagged risks without proper investigation, directly contravenes the purpose of the risk matrix and the Institute's commitment to a robust admissions process. This could lead to decisions that are not only ethically questionable, but also potentially in violation of internal policies designed to prevent unfair admissions. A third incorrect approach, which focuses solely on meeting diversity quotas without a commensurate assessment of academic suitability, risks compromising the academic standards of the Institute and may also be contrary to specific admission guidelines that emphasize both merit and diversity. Professionals in academic admission should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing regulations and ethical principles. This is followed by a systematic data-driven assessment, where any identified risks are thoroughly investigated and addressed. Seeking guidance from senior colleagues or relevant committees when faced with ambiguity or complex ethical dilemmas is crucial. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all decisions are fair, transparent, and aligned with the institution's mission and regulatory obligations. Question 10. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a technical malfunction during the online administration of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam, with a high potential impact on candidate performance. considering only the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate response? Option A. Immediately switch to a paper-based examination format to completely eliminate the risk of technical malfunctions. Option B. Ignore the risk matrix findings, as the current online examination platform has been used successfully in previous years. Option C. Rely on general IT best practices for online exam security and stability, assuming they will cover the institute's specific needs. Option D. Propose a contingency plan for technical malfunctions that is explicitly outlined and approved within the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam regulations. The correct answer is D. Propose a contingency plan for technical malfunctions that is explicitly outlined and approved within the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam regulations. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in interpreting and applying risk assessment data within the specific context of Altamira Technological Institute's entrance examination regulations. The core difficulty lies in translating a general risk matrix, which typically categorizes risks by likelihood and impact, into actionable decisions that adhere strictly to the Institute's established examination framework. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure that any proposed adjustments to the examination process are not only logical, but also compliant with the Institute's stated policies and ethical guidelines for admissions. The correct approach involves a direct correlation between the identified risks and the existing regulatory framework for the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam. This means evaluating whether the risks highlighted in the matrix necessitate a modification of the examination's content, administration, or scoring procedures, and if so, whether such modifications are permissible under the Institute's current guidelines. The regulatory justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of adherence to established rules and procedures. The Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam regulations are the supreme authority governing the examination process. Any deviation or adaptation must be demonstrably supported by these regulations, ensuring fairness, transparency, and the integrity of the admissions process. Ethical considerations also mandate that decisions are based on established criteria rather than subjective interpretations of risk without a clear regulatory basis. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on the perceived severity of risks without consulting or referencing the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam regulations. This fails to acknowledge the primacy of the established framework and could lead to arbitrary or discriminatory practices. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize external best practices or general risk management principles over the specific mandates of the Institute's entrance exam regulations. While external knowledge can be valuable, it cannot supersede the explicit rules set forth by the Institute. This violates the principle of regulatory compliance and could invalidate the examination process. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the risk matrix entirely, assuming the current examination process is inherently flawless. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an unwillingness to adapt to potential issues, which can undermine the credibility of the examination. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the risk assessment data, followed by a thorough examination of the relevant regulatory framework. If risks are identified, the next step is to determine if the existing regulations provide mechanisms for addressing these risks. If they do, those mechanisms should be employed. If the regulations are insufficient, a formal process for proposing amendments or seeking clarification from the relevant governing bodies within Altamira Technological Institute should be initiated, always ensuring that any proposed changes are aligned with the overarching goals and principles of the entrance examination. Question 11. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a key recruitment agency has significantly exceeded its targets for student applications to Altamira Technological Institute, leading to a surge in the applicant pool. However, preliminary reviews suggest that a notable portion of these applications may not fully meet the Institute's standard academic entry requirements. The admissions committee is under pressure to meet overall enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year, considering Altamira Technological Institute's commitment to academic excellence and fair admissions. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Prioritize applicants from the recruitment agency that has met its targets, as this demonstrates their effectiveness in attracting candidates, and adjust the admissions criteria to accommodate a larger number of these applicants to meet enrollment goals. Option B. Focus solely on meeting the overall enrollment targets by accepting a broader range of applicants, including those with borderline qualifications, to ensure the recruitment agency's success is recognized and the institute's numbers are met. Option C. Expedite the review process for applicants sourced by the high-performing recruitment agency, focusing on meeting enrollment numbers while making minor concessions on entry requirements where necessary. Option D. Conduct a thorough, independent review of all applicant files, prioritizing adherence to Altamira's stated admission criteria and academic standards, regardless of the recruitment agency's performance or overall enrollment targets. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough, independent review of all applicant files, prioritizing adherence to Altamira's stated admission criteria and academic standards, regardless of the recruitment agency's performance or overall enrollment targets. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the institute's commitment to academic integrity and the pressure to meet enrollment targets, which can be influenced by external factors like recruitment agency performance. Navigating this requires a nuanced understanding of Altamira Technological Institute's internal policies and relevant ethical guidelines for educational institutions. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that admissions decisions are based solely on merit and adherence to established criteria, rather than being unduly influenced by recruitment metrics that might not align with academic standards. The correct approach involves a thorough, independent review of all applicant files, prioritizing adherence to Altamira's stated admission criteria and academic standards. This approach upholds the principle of fairness and academic rigor, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated on their own merits. This aligns with the ethical obligation of educational institutions to maintain high academic standards and to admit students who are most likely to succeed, thereby protecting the reputation and integrity of the institute. It also implicitly follows any internal guidelines that mandate objective evaluation processes for admissions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the recruitment agency's performance metrics risks compromising academic standards. This approach fails to acknowledge that recruitment success does not automatically equate to candidate suitability or academic potential. Ethically, it could lead to the admission of underqualified students, potentially impacting the learning environment for all students and the overall academic standing of Altamira. Furthermore, it bypasses the established admissions review process, which is designed to ensure a fair and objective assessment of each applicant. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes meeting enrollment targets above all else, even if it means overlooking deficiencies in applicant qualifications, is also professionally unacceptable. This directly contravenes the fundamental purpose of an educational institution, which is to provide quality education. Such a strategy could lead to a decline in academic quality, increased student attrition rates, and damage to the institute's reputation. It also represents a failure to adhere to internal policies that likely emphasize academic merit as a primary admission criterion. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of Altamira's admission policies and ethical codes. When faced with conflicting pressures, professionals must first identify the core values and principles that guide the institution. This involves prioritizing academic integrity and fairness in admissions. If external pressures, such as recruitment agency performance, appear to be influencing or potentially compromising these core values, the professional should advocate for a return to the established, objective evaluation process. This might involve escalating concerns through appropriate internal channels to ensure that decisions are made in the best interest of the institute's academic mission and its students. Question 12. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a specific type of technical anomaly affecting a small subset of candidates during the online proctored portion of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam, with a low impact on overall exam integrity. Which of the following represents the most appropriate response according to the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam's regulatory framework? Option A. Ignore the identified risk as it is categorized as low impact, assuming it will not significantly affect the examination process. Option B. Immediately halt the entire online proctored exam for all candidates to investigate the potential anomaly thoroughly, regardless of its low impact. Option C. Implement a mandatory system-wide software update for all candidates just before the exam begins to preemptively address the anomaly, potentially causing widespread technical issues. Option D. Develop and communicate a clear, predefined protocol for candidates to report such anomalies immediately, with a plan for technical support and potential retesting if necessary, while continuing with the exam as scheduled for the majority. The correct answer is D. Develop and communicate a clear, predefined protocol for candidates to report such anomalies immediately, with a plan for technical support and potential retesting if necessary, while continuing with the exam as scheduled for the majority. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in interpreting and applying risk assessment data within the specific context of Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations. The core difficulty lies in moving beyond a superficial understanding of a risk matrix to a nuanced application that aligns with the exam's stated objectives and ethical guidelines. Professionals must demonstrate an ability to critically evaluate information and make decisions that uphold the integrity of the examination process. The correct approach involves recognizing that the risk matrix, while informative, is a tool to guide decision-making, not a definitive set of rules. It requires understanding the underlying principles of fairness, academic integrity, and the specific mandates of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam framework. This approach prioritizes a holistic interpretation of the data, considering the potential impact on candidates and the institution's reputation, and aligning actions with the exam's stated goals of equitable assessment. The regulatory framework for the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam emphasizes a commitment to fair evaluation and preventing undue advantage, meaning any interpretation of risk must serve these core principles. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the highest identified risk without considering its context or potential mitigation strategies fails to meet the professional standard. This overlooks the nuanced nature of risk assessment and can lead to overly broad or punitive measures that are not proportionate to the actual threat. Ethically, this approach can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and a lack of reasoned judgment. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate implementation of the most severe mitigation without further investigation or consultation ignores the importance of a balanced and informed decision. This can lead to unnecessary disruption or the creation of new, unforeseen risks. From a regulatory standpoint, it demonstrates a lack of adherence to established procedures for handling exam-related issues, which typically involve a process of review and consultation. A further incorrect approach that dismisses the risk matrix entirely as irrelevant or overly cautious fails to acknowledge the value of proactive risk management. This demonstrates a disregard for established assessment protocols and a potential lack of commitment to maintaining the security and integrity of the entrance examination. Professionally, this can be interpreted as negligence and a failure to uphold the responsibilities associated with administering a high-stakes examination. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the risk matrix in conjunction with the specific regulations and ethical guidelines of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam. This includes understanding the nature of each identified risk, its potential impact, the likelihood of its occurrence, and the feasibility and proportionality of various mitigation strategies. Consultation with relevant stakeholders and a thorough review of the exam's objectives are crucial steps before implementing any course of action. The ultimate goal is to ensure a fair, secure, and equitable examination experience for all candidates. Question 13. The audit findings indicate a pattern of potential academic misconduct involving several senior students who have consistently achieved high marks. The audit report suggests that, while there is no definitive proof of cheating, the consistency and nature of certain assignments raise significant concerns about the originality of the work submitted. The Institute's internal regulations for academic integrity emphasize a zero-tolerance policy for plagiarism and other forms of academic dishonesty, but also stipulate a formal investigation process that respects the rights of the accused. Which of the following represents the most appropriate immediate course of action for the Institute's Academic Integrity Committee? Option A. Initiate a formal, confidential investigation into the specific assignments and students flagged by the audit, gathering further evidence and providing the students with an opportunity to respond to any findings before any disciplinary action is considered. Option B. Immediately suspend the involved students from all academic activities pending a review of their entire academic record to determine the extent of the suspected misconduct. Option C. Forward the audit report directly to the relevant external accreditation body for their assessment and guidance on how to proceed. Option D. Issue a general warning to all students about the importance of academic integrity and the consequences of plagiarism, without singling out specific individual or assignments. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal, confidential investigation into the specific assignments and students flagged by the audit, gathering further evidence, and providing the students with an opportunity to respond to any findings before any disciplinary action is considered. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the institute's commitment to academic integrity with the need to address potential misconduct without prejudicing the rights of individuals involved. The pressure to act swiftly due to audit findings must be tempered by adherence to established procedures and principles of fairness. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation, respecting due process for all parties. This aligns with the Altamira Technological Institute's internal regulations concerning academic integrity and disciplinary procedures, which mandate a fair hearing and evidence-based decision-making. The Institute's guidelines likely emphasize the importance of confidentiality, objectivity, and the right to respond to allegations. An incorrect approach that involves immediate punitive action without a proper investigation fails to uphold the principles of natural justice and the Institute's own procedural fairness requirements. This could lead to wrongful accusations and damage to the Institute's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which involves overlooking the findings due to the sensitive nature of the individuals involved, compromises academic standards and creates an environment where misconduct may persist, violating the Institute's core mission of fostering an ethical learning environment. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on external reporting without first exhausting internal investigation and resolution mechanisms may be premature and could bypass established internal protocols designed for such matters, potentially creating unnecessary external scrutiny or misinterpreting the scope of internal versus external reporting obligations. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific allegations and relevant institutional policies. This is followed by gathering all pertinent information objectively, assessing the evidence, and then determining the appropriate course of action in accordance with established procedures, ensuring fairness and due process throughout. Question 14. The efficiency study reveals that students in Method A consistently achieve higher scores on standardized assessments compared to students in Method B, despite both methods covering the same curriculum. Method A involves smaller class sizes and more frequent, individualized feedback sessions, while Method B utilizes larger lecture formats with less frequent, generalized feedback. Considering the Altamira Technological Institute's commitment to fostering a supportive and effective learning environment, which of the following actions best reflects a responsible and ethical response to these findings? Option A. Immediately discontinue Method B and reallocate all associated faculty and resources to Method A, without further investigation into the specific components of Method A that contribute to its success or the potential negative impacts on faculty workload. Option B. Recommend a phased transition to Method A for all relevant courses, reallocating resources to support smaller class sizes and increased faculty time for individualized feedback, while conducting further qualitative research to understand student experiences. Option C. Propose a pilot program to test a hybrid approach that combines elements of both Method A and Method B, focusing on cost-effectiveness, without a thorough analysis of how this hybrid might impact student learning outcomes or faculty pedagogical approaches. Option D. Publicly acknowledge the study's findings, but attribute the differences to inherent student motivation rather than teaching methodology, and maintain the current resource allocation for both methods. The correct answer is B. Recommend a phased transition to Method A for all relevant courses, reallocating resources to support smaller class sizes and increased faculty time for individualized feedback, while conducting further qualitative research to understand student experiences. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant disparity in student performance across different teaching methodologies employed at the Altamira Technological Institute. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires educators and administrators to make evidence-based decisions that directly impact student learning outcomes and resource allocation, while adhering strictly to the Altamira Technological Institute's established academic policies and ethical guidelines for educational practice. The pressure to demonstrate improvement and justify pedagogical choices necessitates a rigorous and principled approach. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the efficiency study's findings, cross-referencing them with the Institute's stated learning objectives and pedagogical principles. This includes identifying specific areas where teaching methods are underperforming, analyzing potential contributing factors beyond the methodology itself, e.g., student demographics, resource availability, and proposing targeted interventions or adjustments to the curriculum and faculty training. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible as it prioritizes student success and aligns with the Institute's commitment to providing quality education. It adheres to the Altamira Technological Institute's guidelines by focusing on data-driven improvement and student-centric learning, ensuring that any changes are well justified and implemented thoughtfully. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the study's findings due to a perceived bias, or to implement sweeping, unanalyzed changes based on superficial interpretations of the data. Dismissing the findings without proper investigation would violate the ethical obligation to continuously improve educational practices and could lead to the perpetuation of ineffective teaching methods. Implementing unanalyzed changes risks disrupting established successful practices and could negatively impact students who are currently benefiting from existing methodologies. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on cost-cutting measures suggested by the study without considering the pedagogical implications, which would be ethically questionable as it prioritizes financial concerns over student learning and well-being, potentially violating the Institute's core mission. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, thoroughly understand the data and its limitations. Second, evaluate the findings against the Institute's established goals and ethical framework. Third, consult with relevant stakeholders, including faculty and academic leadership. And finally, develop and implement evidence-based strategies that are both pedagogically sound and ethically defensible, with clear mechanisms for ongoing evaluation. Question 15. Governance review demonstrates that a critical alert has been received by the Altamira Technological Institute's IT security team regarding a potential unauthorized access to the applicant database. The alert is flagged as high priority, but requires further verification. The head of admissions, upon hearing of the alert, is concerned about the potential impact on applicant trust and the upcoming application deadline. Which of the following actions best aligns with the Altamira Technological Institute's likely governance framework and entrance exam regulations regarding data security and incident response? Option A. Advise the IT security team to temporarily disable access to the applicant database until the alert can be fully investigated, regardless of the impact on the application process. Option B. Issue a general statement to all staff acknowledging a security review without disclosing specific details of the alert to avoid causing alarm. Option C. Initiate the Institute's formal data breach incident response protocol, involving the IT security team and designated legal counsel for investigation and assessment before any external communication. Option D. Immediately inform all registered applicants about the potential data breach to ensure transparency and allow them to take protective measures. The correct answer is D. Immediately inform all registered applicants about the potential data breach to ensure transparency and allow them to take protective measures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need to address a potential data breach and the established protocols for reporting and investigation. The Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations likely emphasize data privacy, security, and adherence to reporting procedures. A hasty, unauthorized disclosure could violate these principles, leading to reputational damage, loss of trust, and potential disciplinary action. The correct approach involves a measured response that prioritizes adherence to the Altamira Technological Institute's established data breach response plan. This plan, mandated by the Institute's governance framework, would outline specific steps for containment, investigation, and notification, ensuring that all actions are compliant with internal policies and any relevant external data protection guidelines that Altamira Technological Institute is bound by. This approach upholds the principles of due process, thorough investigation, and responsible disclosure, minimizing the risk of further harm. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, unauthorized public disclosure of the suspected breach fails to respect the established protocols. This action bypasses the necessary investigation phase, potentially spreading misinformation or causing undue panic among applicants. It also likely violates the Institute's data handling policies, which would require a formal assessment before any external communication. Another incorrect approach, that of ignoring the alert due to its preliminary nature, is also professionally unacceptable. It demonstrates a disregard for potential security vulnerabilities and a failure to act in good faith to protect applicant data. The Institute's governance framework would expect proactive measures to investigate any credible threat, not a passive stance that could exacerbate a breach if it were indeed occurring. Finally, an approach that involves a vague, internal communication without a clear plan for investigation or resolution is insufficient. While it acknowledges the issue internally, it lacks the decisive action and structured response required by a robust governance framework. This approach fails to provide assurance to stakeholders and does not adequately address the potential risks. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Recognizing the potential severity of the situation and the need for immediate, yet controlled action. 2. Consulting and strictly adhering to the Altamira Technological Institute's established data breach response plan and relevant internal policies. 3. Initiating the investigation process as outlined in the plan, involving the designated IT security and legal teams. 4. Communicating internally to relevant stakeholders according to the plan, ensuring information is shared responsibly and without premature conclusions. 5. Planning external communication only after a thorough assessment and in accordance with regulatory and policy requirements. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal a significant discrepancy between a teacher's recommendation letter for a prospective student at Altamira Technological Institute and the student's submitted academic record. The recommendation letter is overwhelmingly positive, yet the academic record shows a period of significantly lower performance that is not addressed in the letter. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Proceed with the application based on the positive aspects of the recommendation letter, assuming the academic record reflects a temporary issue. Option B. Contact the applicant directly to inquire about the discrepancy between their academic record and the teacher's recommendation. Option C. Disregard the recommendation letter and base the decision solely on the applicant's academic record. Option D. Immediately seek clarification from the teacher who provided the recommendation letter to understand the discrepancy. The correct answer is D. Immediately seek clarification from the teacher who provided the recommendation letter to understand the discrepancy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a potential conflict between academic integrity and the desire to support a student's application. The admissions committee must uphold the Altamira Technological Institute standards for evaluating applicants while also ensuring fairness and accuracy in the assessment process. Misrepresenting information or overlooking discrepancies could undermine the credibility of the admissions process and the institute itself. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing considerations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted materials, cross-referencing them with the information provided by the teacher, and then seeking clarification from the teacher regarding the specific discrepancies. This approach is right because it adheres to the principles of due diligence and transparency inherent in any fair evaluation process. It prioritizes accuracy and integrity by directly addressing the inconsistencies rather than ignoring them or making assumptions. This aligns with the ethical obligation to ensure that admissions decisions are based on truthful and verifiable information, cornerstone of academic integrity at institutions like Altamira Technological Institute. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the application without investigating the discrepancies would be an ethical failure. It bypasses the responsibility to verify information and could lead to an unfair advantage for the applicant or the admission of an unqualified candidate. thereby compromising the institute's standards. Accepting the teacher's initial positive recommendation at face value, despite the contradictory information, is also an ethical lapse. It demonstrates a lack of critical evaluation and a failure to follow through on the quality control measures that were initiated. This approach prioritizes expediency over accuracy. Directly contacting the applicant to question the teacher's feedback, without first attempting to resolve the issue with the teacher, could be seen as unprofessional and potentially create an uncomfortable situation for the applicant. It bypasses the established channels of communication and could be perceived as undermining the teacher's role in the admissions process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in admissions should adopt a systematic approach when faced with conflicting information. This involves 1. Identifying the discrepancy. 2. Gathering all relevant information. 3. Attempting to resolve the discrepancy through direct, professional communication with the source of the initial information, in this case, the teacher. 4. If necessary, escalating the issue or seeking further clarification through appropriate internal channels. The ultimate goal is to ensure that decisions are made on a foundation of accurate and verified information, upholding the integrity of the institution. Question 17. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a specific question being misinterpreted due to ambiguous wording, potentially impacting a small but identifiable group of candidates. Considering the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam's strict adherence to its own regulatory framework, which of the following actions best reflects the required response? Option A. Consult general best practices for question design in higher education entrance exams to identify potential solutions, without specific reference to the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exams regulations. Option B. Immediately revise the question to eliminate any potential ambiguity, ensuring it aligns with the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exams guidelines for clarity and fairness. Option C. Acknowledge the risk and proceed with the exam as planned, trusting that candidates will interpret the question reasonably, as is common in many standardized tests. Option D. Flag the ambiguity as a minor issue that falls outside the scope of immediate concern for the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam's core integrity, focusing instead on more significant risks. Correct answer is B. Immediately revise the question to eliminate any potential ambiguity, ensuring it aligns with the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam's guidelines for clarity and fairness. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in interpreting and applying risk assessment data within the specific context of Altamira Technological Institute's entrance examination regulations. The core difficulty lies in distinguishing between a general understanding of risk and the precise requirements mandated by the exam's governing framework. Professionals must demonstrate an ability to move beyond superficial interpretations and engage with the specific rules and guidelines that dictate acceptable practices. The correct approach involves a direct and accurate application of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam's regulatory framework to the information presented in the risk matrix. This means identifying how the matrix's findings directly inform decisions about the exam's integrity and fairness, strictly adhering to the established rules. The regulatory justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of compliance. The Altamira Technological Institute entrance exams regulations are the supreme authority for this assessment. Any action taken must align with these rules to ensure the validity and fairness of the examination process. Ethical considerations also demand adherence to these regulations, as they are designed to protect the interests of all prospective students and the reputation of the institute. An incorrect approach would be to generalize risk management principles without grounding them in the specific Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam regulations. For instance, focusing solely on the general concept of mitigating potential issues, without referencing the exam's specific protocols for addressing such issues, would be a failure. This overlooks the critical requirement to operate only within the specified jurisdiction. Another incorrect approach would be to introduce external best practices or common risk management strategies that are not explicitly endorsed or incorporated into the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exams framework. This violates the strict jurisdictional compliance mandate, which prohibits mixing or referencing regulations from other contexts. Such deviations risk invalidating the exam's procedures and potentially leading to unfair outcomes for candidates. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a rigorous process of identifying the governing regulatory framework, thoroughly understanding its provisions, and then applying those provisions directly to the presented scenario. It involves a conscious effort to filter out extraneous information or general knowledge that does not directly pertain to the specific rules of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam. The professional must ask, what does the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam's regulatory framework say about this specific risk, and what actions does it prescribe? Question 18. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of candidates misunderstanding the scope of permitted pre-exam study materials for the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam. Considering the institute's commitment to academic integrity, which of the following actions best mitigates this risk? Option A. Relying on common knowledge of university entrance exam preparation guidelines. Option B. Consulting forums and social media groups where past candidates discuss their preparation strategies. Option C. Seeking clarification directly from the Altamira Technological Institute's admissions office regarding acceptable study resources. Option D. Assuming that any study method not explicitly forbidden is permissible. The correct answer is A. Relying on common knowledge of university entrance exam preparation guidelines. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in interpreting and applying the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam guidelines, specifically concerning the acceptable use of external resources during the examination period. The core difficulty lies in distinguishing between permissible preparatory activities and prohibited forms of assistance that could compromise the integrity of the exam. Careful judgment is required to ensure adherence to the Institute's academic honesty policies. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Altamira Technological Institute's official entrance exam regulations, focusing on clauses that define academic misconduct and acceptable study practices. This approach is correct because it directly consults the authoritative source of rules governing the exam. Adhering to these specific regulations is paramount for maintaining academic integrity and ensuring a fair assessment for all candidates. The ethical justification lies in upholding the principles of honesty and fairness inherent in any educational evaluation process. An incorrect approach would be to rely on general understandings of exam rules or advice from peers who may not have accurate or up-to-date information regarding Altamira's specific policies. This is ethically flawed because it risks misinterpreting or ignoring the Institute's explicit directives, potentially leading to unintentional violations. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that any form of collaborative study or information gathering is acceptable as long as it does not involve direct cheating during the exam itself. This fails to recognize that the Altamira regulations likely encompass pre-exam conduct that could confer an unfair advantage. The regulatory failure here is a disregard for the defined scope of acceptable preparation, which could be interpreted as an attempt to circumvent the spirit of the rules. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes consulting official documentation for any regulated activity. When faced with ambiguity, the principle of seeking clarification from the governing body, in this case, the Altamira Technological Institute's Admissions or Examination Committee, should be followed. This ensures that actions are taken with full knowledge of and compliance with the established rules, thereby safeguarding against academic misconduct. Question 19. Upon reviewing the applications for the upcoming academic year at Altamira Technological Institute, an admissions committee member notices that one applicant, a relative of a prominent alumnus who has pledged significant future donations, has a lower academic score than several other highly qualified candidates. The committee member is aware of the Institute's strong emphasis on academic merit and fair evaluation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the committee member to ensure adherence to the Institute's regulatory framework and ethical standards? Option A. Recommend admitting the applicant to meet enrollment targets, even if their academic qualifications are slightly below the standard, to secure the alumnus's donation. Option B. Advocate for the applicant's admission based on their potential future contributions and the alumnus's influence, while ensuring other candidates are still reviewed. Option C. Objectively evaluate the applicant solely based on the established academic criteria and the Institute's published admission guidelines, regardless of external factors. Option D. Suggest creating a separate review category for applicants with strong external affiliations to expedite their consideration. The correct answer is B. Advocate for the applicant's admission based on their potential future contributions and the alumnus's influence, while ensuring other candidates are still reviewed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes for the institute. The admissions committee must navigate the ethical imperative of fair and unbiased evaluation against the potential for external influence or personal bias. Careful judgment is required to uphold the Altamira Technological Institute's commitment to meritocracy and equal opportunity. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of all application materials, adhering strictly to the established admission criteria and procedures. This ensures that decisions are based on demonstrable qualifications and potential, rather than subjective impressions or external pressures. This aligns with the ethical principles of fairness, impartiality, and transparency expected in academic admissions processes. It upholds the integrity of the institute's selection process and ensures that all candidates are evaluated on an equal footing, as mandated by the institute's internal regulations on admissions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes a candidate based on a personal connection, without a rigorous evaluation of their qualifications against the established criteria, constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and potentially violates the institute's admissions policies. This introduces bias and undermines the principle of meritocracy. Another incorrect approach, which involves overlooking significant deficiencies in a candidate's application due to a desire to meet enrollment targets, compromises the academic standards of the institute. This practice can lead to the admission of underqualified students, potentially impacting the overall quality of education and the reputation of the institution. It disregards the institute's commitment to admitting students who are academically prepared to succeed. A further incorrect approach, which involves creating a separate, less stringent set of criteria for certain applicants based on perceived future contributions or affiliations, is discriminatory and unethical. This violates the principle of equal treatment and can lead to accusations of favoritism and unfairness, damaging the institute's credibility. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding and strict adherence to the Altamira Technological Institute's published admission policies and ethical guidelines. When faced with conflicting pressures or ambiguous situations, professionals should consult these established frameworks, seek guidance from supervisors or ethics committees, and prioritize objective evidence and established procedures over personal opinions or external influences. The focus must always remain on upholding the integrity and fairness of the admissions process. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that an applicant for the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam has submitted their application form with all sections completed, but has inadvertently omitted one of the mandatory supporting documents as listed in the official examination guidelines. The applicant is otherwise highly qualified based on their academic record. Which of the following actions best adheres to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam? Option A. Accept a verbal confirmation from the applicant that they will submit the document immediately after the examination, allowing them to participate. Option B. Inform the applicant of the missing mandatory document and advise them that they cannot proceed with the examination until the document is submitted and verified according to the institute's regulations. Option C. Proceed with the applicant's examination, noting the missing document to be rectified post-examination, as their academic record is strong. Option D. Allow the applicant to take the examination and then attempt to obtain the missing document from the applicant's previous institution without their direct involvement. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the applicant's examination, noting the missing document to be rectified post-examination, as their academic record is strong. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for Altamira Technological Institute's admissions committee, specifically concerning the integrity of the entrance examination process. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient processing of applications with the absolute imperative of upholding the fairness and validity of the entrance exam. Any deviation from established protocols, even if seemingly minor or intended to expedite a process, can undermine the credibility of the entire admission system and potentially lead to legal or ethical repercussions for the institute. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are in strict adherence to the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of the applicant's documentation against the established criteria for eligibility and the specific requirements of the Altamira Technological Institute entrance exam. This ensures that all candidates are assessed on a level playing field, adhering to the principles of fairness and equal opportunity enshrined in the Institute's regulatory framework. Specifically, it requires verifying that the applicant meets all stated prerequisites for admission as outlined in the official examination guidelines, and that their application materials are complete and accurate according to those same guidelines. This approach directly aligns with the regulatory requirement to conduct a fair and transparent examination process, preventing any undue advantage or disadvantage to any candidate. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking a missing mandatory document, even if the applicant has otherwise strong qualifications, represents a direct violation of the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations. These regulations are designed to ensure a standardized and equitable assessment, and such an oversight could be interpreted as preferential treatment or a failure to enforce established rules, thereby compromising the integrity of the examination. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the examination without the required documentation and address it later, also fails to meet regulatory compliance. The entrance exam regulations likely stipulate that all required documentation must be submitted and verified prior to the examination. Allowing an applicant to participate without fulfilling these prerequisites undermines the structured and controlled nature of the examination process and could lead to disputes or challenges regarding the validity of the results. A further incorrect approach, such as accepting a verbal assurance from the applicant regarding the missing document without any form of official verification or provisional acceptance clause as per regulations, is also a breach of compliance. Entrance examinations are formal processes governed by strict rules. Relying on informal assurances rather than established procedures introduces an element of subjectivity and risk, potentially leading to the admission of unqualified candidates or creating grounds for future challenges to the admissions process. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the Altamira Technological Institute's entrance exam regulations. When faced with an incomplete application, the professional must first consult the official guidelines to determine the specific requirements and the established procedure for handling such discrepancies. If the regulations permit a provisional acceptance under specific conditions, that path should be followed with strict adherence to those conditions. If the regulations are clear that all documentation must be submitted and verified prior to examination, then the applicant must be informed of the deficiency and the consequences of non-compliance, which may include disqualification from the examination. The guiding principle is always to uphold the integrity and fairness of the examination process, as defined by the Institute's own regulatory framework.